Okay. So, ZvT, especially on maps with lots of drop cliffs against aggressive Terrans, the game plan should sort of evolve, as Zerg tends to do, into a counter style of what the Terran is doing. And deciding what that counter approach is going to be depends on a couple key scouting maneuvers. You have all the basic fundamentals of, in general in ZvT, you want to drone fast. In general, you want to fill map vision as best you can, fill dead space vision. You want to spread creep. You want to spend your money. All those sorts of things. But whether you want to go Lingbane Corruptor or go for Roach Ravager or whatever your approach to the matchup is, a lot of times, based on some key reads, you can adjust your style and go for a slightly different game plan that is more effective against what the Terran is doing. And this map has a huge drop cliff area in the main. You can do some really big YOLO drops there. This area is pretty exposed to drops. There's enough dead space behind these bases that they can fly Medivacs down here and you can't kill them with ground units. So the Mutalisk ends up being a really, really good option here, just because it can really bring some closure to the hyper-aggressive dropping from Terran. Another thing that's kind of worth considering, like in little interactions like this, it ends up mattering a lot. ZvT is a very momentum-based matchup where every little bit of damage in the early game scales pretty powerfully for the rest of the game. Because imagine this drone. This drone mines about 1 mineral per second. There were 2 drones that were getting shot at that got kind of low. I made them into spores and then canceled them, so they get to continue to mine. You could imagine, I wish they had the counter down here next to the kills, resources mined or minerals and gas mined. You could imagine that this drone probably mines enough to make a couple mutas by the end of the game because it was kept alive against the Reaper. So the early game is super important, and you should take these types of things seriously. If you're not very good against the first Reaper, you need to figure out what procedures you need to be taking. Do you need to be microing your lings differently? Do you need to micro your drones differently? Let's actually just go over the procedure real fast, so it's spelled out in the video since we're talking about it. So the Reaper comes in, you can't explain that. Well, you can. I saw it with this Overlord. Then I'm up here to the top of the ramp. Reaper comes to the hatch, and the top priority is to keep your drones alive. Ideally, you wouldn't lose any units, but as long as your drones are alive, you're all right. The first thing is to be patient, and you don't chase the Reaper unless the Reaper actively threatens your drones. I have 2 lings here. The Reaper is shooting my hatchery. It's not going to kill a hatchery, so I have my lings on hold position. I'm not going to go take the bait. I'm going to wait, and then once the Reaper shoots my drone, then I'll bite. Once it kites back, I pull my lings back. If a drone is low, I morph it into a spore. Usually it's better to be a little bit overly conservative and morph them early, rather than wait until the last possible moment. And the Queen comes out, and then I got a little bit lucky there that he risked going up to the high ground. Cancel both of them, and then these drones get to happily mine for the rest of the game. Another thing to consider too is, what do you do with your 4 lings after the Reaper has been dealt with? I already have the information that the opponent opened Marine with this Overlord here, so I'm going to take a map objective. I'm going to break these rocks. Breaking these rocks makes this blue 4th base more accessible. If I were to break these rocks, it would make this expansion more accessible. So it's a task that my lings can perform. I'm gaining value from my 4 Zerglings while I'm droning as hard as I possibly can. I can see here with this Overlord that there are still some Marines. I can rule out really heavy Hellion builds just by how many Marines are kind of spread out trying to kill my Overlords. It's probably a 2 barracks, 1 factory, 1 starport build. Against that, I favor going double Evo chamber melee upgrades for really strong lings, and I make a bunch of queens. The queens are control against the air. They can put pressure on the Medivacs. They spread a bunch of creep, which scales well into the 4 base stage. On this map, and really on every map, Creep connecting your bases is incredibly important. A lot of people will straight up lose games because they have queens in one place, the bases are not creep connected, the Terran pokes, they shoot at one location, they pick up in the medivacs, boost over somewhere else, and unload, and your queens are walking sluggishly up the ramp. It's worth sparing the creep tumor, especially if you're really heavy on queens. So for your prioritization of creep spread, first priority is to creep connect your bases. Second priority is to push creep out from your base and toward your fourth base. This is the real powerful spot if I want to come online with Ling Bane Muta. In the mid game, I really need my fourth base, so that's going to be the top priority of my queens later on. So this is just after 5 minutes, and the first medivac mine pressure is coming in. I don't need to chase. A lot of times Terrans will try and bait you. The same thing with the Reaper in the early game. They shoot at you to try and annoy you and get you to go out and take a fight. But they're not shooting anything. They're not shooting any drones, not damaging any of my bases or whatever. So I'm content to just keep droning, keep doing my thing. I have enough defense here. A little bit over 30 lings and lots of queens. I have them on separate hotkeys because they have different jobs. I want my queens to focus the medivacs if they can. My lings can fight the bio. I built one spore there and there and there because I know there's a Widow Mine in the game, and the opponent's likely to make more of them. Now it's basically a money race. I'm trying to drone 3 bases as fast as I can. I have 59 drones. I want to saturate everything, but as I saturate more, I want to think about making sure I have some defense. So I'm making some banelings to offset the really big economic advantage I'm making for myself. I made about 5, usually 5 to 8 banes, and you're pretty safe. Even if they were to go for like 2 base of aggression, if you have 5 banes, you can deter the Marines from attacking your lings, and you can morph more banelings. Anytime the Terran pokes you, it's really good to check the minimap and see if they're going to drop you somewhere else. The 1-2 punch is one of the most powerful moves in any matchup for any race, and if you're just focusing on the units you already see, you're going to miss the 2 punch if you're focused on the 1 punch. Unless you're 1 punch man and then you just beat them swiftly with a single blow. So queen's controlling space. I'm emphasizing my spire above 2-2 and above baneling speed. That's going to give me lots of control to clean up these medivacs and allow me to focus on ground again so that I can take my 4th base. Now I need a key scouting read. I don't see the opponent's 3rd. I need to know whether or not the opponent is taking gases. If they're not taking gases, then they're going to be very heavy on Marines and usually very high on aggression. They want to try and chip away the Zerg, deal lots of damage, prevent them from getting to their really nice 3 to 4 base saturation. I'm taking the attack upgrade for my mutas first, and then I'll take armor next. My queens and the spore were just in the main and ended up killing a drop, so that was just a nice defensive formation that ended up catching something. A lot of players will be throwing a bunch of harassment options at you, but it costs a lot of attention to perform multi-prong attacks and also macro behind it, so they're not going to be giving perfect attention to everything at the same time. And by spreading out your units, you can deal with a lot of different threats. So the 3 key hotkeys I have right now, I have my Ling Bane on a hotkey, I have my Creep Queens on a hotkey, but I don't have my Inject Queens on a hotkey, and then I have my Mutas on a hotkey. I'm not going to move out across the map with my Mutas until I have more than 14. 14 Mutas is enough to one-shot a Widow Mine. Once I have that many Mutas, I'll be able to put some pressure on the opponent's production. But as I'm building up the Mutaflock count, it's purely for defense. So what, right now I have 66 drones, now 65 taking the board. Trying to continue to spread creep, spreading overlords. Overlord speed is really good. It's good for getting information. It's good for allowing the overseers to keep up with your Ling Bane Muta. Overseers used to be a lot slower, and they got buffs for that reason in particular, so they could keep up with a Ling Bane Muta. I'm going to try and break these rocks with my lings, take another map objective, Zerg in general does well with surrounds if they're making melee units. So you could say that we hate rocks, and if there are rocks and we're not actively fighting against the opponent's army, then taking some time to kill rocks is good. Look on the minimap, you see one little red dot coming toward my main. My mutas are just going to intercept that, and then I can focus on this ground engagement without my mutas. My Bane speed is late, but I don't really care because all the fights I'm taking with my ground army are on creep for now. So I killed that drop. I still have the worker lead. Now I'm going to go for 2-2. If you take too many advantages, if you take a tech lead, a worker lead, an upgrade lead, a lot of times you just die. So I delayed my upgrades a little bit in favor of getting a larger mutaflock earlier and being able to have more drones. So it's pretty good defense. Ground army just cleaning up the biggest mixture of stuff. And then now my mutas can focus those medivacs. And then I'm getting into the neighborhood where I can be focusing their production with my mutas. Mutas are very precious units. They should get a lot more attention than your Ling Bane. If you were to think about my value density of the army, the mutaflock location is the greatest concentration of what I've put into the game. Ling Bane is fairly cheap. Queens are fairly cheap. So as the opponent's moving out, I don't want to come back because let's look at their unit composition. 33 Marines, which in a direct fight you could say are counters to mutas with upgrades. What does he have? He has +2 attack, +1 armor. 4 Liberators. 2 of them are already here. They do splash to mutas. And 6 Widow Mines. So this is like the worst possible place for my mutas to do stuff. But since the army is focused on dealing damage here, he's focused on pre-splitting, scanning. There are a lot of tasks that the Terran has to focus on and perform when they're pushing Zerg creep. These mutas are often able to swing in and just kill all the units that are coming out. So he's at 149 supply right now. That's 94 supply in army and 55 workers. The army supply isn't going to grow very fast because I'm killing all these units as they're leaving the barracks factory and starports. This allows me to focus on my ground army again. So look at my vision and see. I'm trying to work on giving the mutaflock more attention because if you miss it for just a little bit, it can die to a couple Widow Mines or a bunch of stimmed Marines. So I'm looking at this engagement, and then I've basically beaten it, so I go right back to the mutas, try and deal some more damage. And where the mutas are right now is basically the throat of the Terran. This is the most vital spot for them to control. It's even more vital than SCVs. SCVs, they have mules. So you temporarily reduce their mineral income, but usually they have a surplus. So this is the spot that really puts heavy pressure on their ability to continue to be strong in the match. Hive is my follow-up, but it wasn't really a rush hive. Like, I didn't try to get Hive as fast as I could. I tried to get the mutaflock that I wanted to be able to defend against air, and then to pressure the enemy's production, which was about 15 mutas. Now I'm trying to focus the Widow memes before they go off, and the Ling Bane can go in, start to attack. You can't always go for a Ling Bane muta counter swing. It kind of depends on the Terran making a few mistakes. So several medivacs were lost. I killed a bunch of stuff while the opponent didn't kill too much of mine. I'm getting close to max, my Hive is on the way. But I have an opportunity here. And I'm not going to go for the third base, I feel like I can end the game, so I'm going up the ramp, and then just closing the game. I have my 5th base behind this. My 4th base is perfectly saturated. My 3rd base, I pulled some workers, I think, or this is my 2nd base. I pulled some workers to the 4th. The 5th base has some drones here. This is a little bit inefficient by me, but it's not too terrible. The base is going to finish up, and then I'm going to have really good income. And then this base is really well saturated. A little bit too much. High finishes, I would go for Ultra Cavern, 3-3, Adrenal Glands. Do I have Burrow? Let's go upgrades. I don't have Burrow. Burrow with Infestors is a really, really good kind of synergy. Ultras are easily kited by bio, so you either need a bunch of Ling Bane or some Infestors to fungal them. And Burrow was buffed to Infestors where they can cast their spells while burrowed now. So they have to either spend scans, build a Raven, or pay the consequences of being clumped up. Does the attack upgrade influence the mutas required to one-shot mines? Well, it increases their damage, so yes. They'll kill mines faster. A lot of times, not all of your mutas are participating when they fire their volley, because you don't always have them perfectly stacked, like so. So the attack upgrade gives you a little bit more leeway in being able to one-shot the mines. Plays on plays on plays. So talk through the Terran game of how the Terran would have played to beat me. ZvT, Lingbane Muta versus Biomine is one of the most, you could say, strategically simple but mechanically difficult interactions in any matchup. So it's less about, oh, let me think about the smartest possible move here. A lot of times it just comes down to who's doing the fundamental stuff faster. And there's a nice side to that, but there's also kind of the frustrating side of some opponents you face are just faster than you at the matchup. They're better at dividing and conquering, doing what they have to with the units they have, conserving their units, taking upgrades and macroing behind it, taking bases. So like I just beat Kawaiian just now, who's kind of a peer of mine, but if I were to face like a higher tier Terran like Jason, repeatedly smashes me on the ladder. And he's, what, top 50 GM Terran? He does basically the exact same stuff, it's just all the different fundamental aspects of his play are better. So if you're confused about why you're losing in your TVZ or ZvT, focus on your fundamentals. Kawaiian had a big bank that he didn't spend. If he spent his bank better, he would have had more army, and I wouldn't have been able to just kill him then, probably. I would have probably had to transition into Hive Tech. If you go Broodlords, what's the best way for a Terran to counter that? Well, they can go Vikings and they can go Ghosts. Broodlords at the moment I don't think are as good as Ultras if they're going for bio. They're very, very slow, so you can't really do those decisive counter pushes where if the Terran kind of pressures you and then you get your Broodlords, they know for a long time the Broodlords are coming at them, so they have more time to prepare and get ready for it. Wouldn't the Corruptors counter Vikings? Yeah. What about a mech player? Mech is kind of weird now because of the Thor change. Thors are incredible against Broodlords. Or Broodlord used to be the unit where if you mass a bunch of them, then you can just crush mech. But they deal like super huge damage to Broodlords from a very long range. Most players will go something like Roach Hydra Viper, maybe with some with some Swarm Hosts, like 8 to 12 Swarm Hosts to harass, and then they'll go into Broodlords after that. Because the Roach Hydra Viper encourages more tanks, or Roach Hydra does. When I had my mutas in the opponent's base, were they on hold position? No. You kind of do want them to chase stuff a little bit, because if they're on hold position, the Terran can just point their production away from the mutas, and they'll kind of be able to pool up army on either side. Whereas if the mutas are not on hold position, if a Marine comes out of a barracks and runs off to the side, the mutas will aggro onto it, and they're more likely to kill it. So I would say that's a situation where hold position isn't super great. Hold position over workers can be good sometimes, but I didn't think that it was a great move there.